Vladimir Putin, quote-unquote, justified the invasion of Ukraine, claiming that the Ukrainian government was controlled by Nazis, and thus it was Russia's military's supposed duty to liberate the Ukrainians from this alleged fascist state. This is completely false, and I really do hope you're all on the same page with me. If you think otherwise, you may have been watching a lot of Russian propaganda. I don't think there's a point in rationalizing Putin's reasoning for the invasion of Ukraine, because he's just making stuff up in an attempt to not lose support for the war. It's a lot harder to justify a war when you're the aggressor and committing war crimes in Ukraine. But I mean, sure, if it's against the quote-unquote Nazis, then the Russian people may be deceived into tolerating the war and siding with the government. Alright, so my thesis for this video is trying to explain why Vladimir Putin is so obsessed with this notion of supposed Nazis in Ukraine, and try to debunk many of the lies he's told the Russian people regarding this. Before I continue though, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's try to hit 500. But I digress. We could trace this mentality based on how Russia has cultivated the notion that the Soviet Union liberated Europe from the Nazis in the Second World War. While yes, it is a true fact that the Soviet Union did play a key role in the defeat of Nazi Germany, of course having suffered the most casualties in the European theater. But the Soviet Union wasn't exactly a saint either. They pretty much worked covertly with the Nazis to invade Poland, and Joseph Stalin was responsible for many political executions in the USSR. Unfortunately, Russia was under the control of a dictator as well, so censorship and oppression was pretty widespread. The Soviets only attacked Nazi Germany because Hitler invaded the USSR first, and now that the USSR was officially fighting in the war, this allowed them to gobble up as many countries as they could in Eastern Europe. So could we really say that the USSR really liberated Eastern Europe? Sure, it would have been way worse if the Nazis won the war. But the leader of Russia, Joseph Stalin, didn't really have a goal of liberating countries. Instead, he absorbed many countries into the Soviet Union and its sphere of influence. The Baltic states and Poland, for example, fully resent this to this very day, and it's still a recent memory. And now the Ukrainian invasion is a reminder of what they had to endure under the alleged Russian liberation. Despite everything, the Russian government twisted the reality of the Second World War through their use of propaganda, which, if you didn't know already, is called the Great Patriotic War in Russia instead of World War II. Fighting the Nazis has been made to go to the heart of the Russian soul. The ruling classes of Russia have been cynically using these considerable tragedies and losses due to the Second World War to manipulate the population since the war started. Nazis are the punching bag of modern history. Do you want to defame your opponent? Claim they are Nazis. It's a way to remind people of the Second World War, which is a huge deal in Russia. The Soviet Union lost 20 million people fighting against Nazi Germany, and it's a central part of their national identity. Something Vladimir Putin has not only encouraged, but whipped into a cult of sorts, to the point where any enemy of Russia could be called a Nazi. Reminding people of outside enemies distracts the people from all the terrible things successive Russian governments have done to their own people, and saying Nazi is just a shortcut to get people behind him and not ask any questions. Needless to say, Putin knows it's not true and may not really believe it himself. It's pretty much just a way to manipulate people who have already primed to react the right way to this dog whistle. The truth is that the president of Russia never cared about fighting alleged Nazis or anything like that. It was just a pretense for taking over Ukraine. So yeah, his statements are preposterous. Such as that Nazis are quote-unquote making a comeback in Europe. They are pretty much clinging onto some facts and then twisting them or making BS stories out of them. For example, the Azov battalion in Ukraine was a paramilitary group of neo-Nazis. They were enrolled into the Territorial Defense Army and have made their way into the government, but they received less than 2% of the votes, and actually haven't secured a single seat. This is a fact. After all, I think it's pretty reasonable to say that there are neo-Nazis in every country on Earth. But the truth is that people like neo-Nazis are part of small fringe groups that don't really reflect the state of the average people, much less the government of a country. To suggest that Zelensky, for example, is a Nazi is a complete lie. During the Second World War, 4 brothers from the same Jewish family signed up to fight against the Nazis. Only one of the 4 brothers survived, and his grandson is the current president of Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's claim that the Ukrainian government is a Nazi regime which is taking the rest of the country hostage is a rhetoric that is factually wrong, morally repugnant, and deeply offensive to the memory of millions of victims of real fascism. It's clear that Putin is throwing words around like Nazism without necessarily meaning what that entails. The way I would describe Nazism is fascism with a layer on top, with alleged racial superiority, and the need to exterminate those deemed inferior, while expanding to achieve Lebensraum. The government of Ukraine doesn't really steer that way. After all, it was the victim of both Nazi and Soviet oppression and occupation. But what does fascism really mean? To quote Wikipedia, fascism is a form of far-right, authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and a strong regimentation of society and the economy. While the Russian government may not fit the category quite literally, it's pretty ironic and scary to see how Putin may be leaning towards this ideology. Putin's invasion of Ukraine was unjustified. He claimed he would demilitarize and denazify the country, and well, he achieved the complete opposite. Western countries, for example, have sided with Ukraine, and have supplied them with military weapons. Despite Ukraine losing some of the tanks over the course of the invasion, the country has more tanks now than before the war started. Why? Because Ukrainians keep on seizing tanks. I'm sure Putin is frustrated that his plan didn't really go accordingly. He pretty much wanted to paint a negative image of the Ukrainian government based on the lies that they were neo-Nazis. However, now the rest of the world is able to see the hypocrisy of the Kremlin, and how the Russian military is starting to show its cracks. I'm sure Putin is still popular in Russia because of his propaganda, but I can't really say the same about the international community, because it seems that the trust on Putin is plummeting down, while Zelensky proved himself to be a true leader, and is deeply respected in both Ukraine and outside of it. So yeah, Vladimir Putin, you've played yourself. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm very happy to see my channel grow and everything. I'll be sure to talk about more lighthearted stuff in the future. But yeah, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.